So we're just on the outskirts of Peine. It's an interesting village. It's not that pretty, to be honest. We're on the edge of a massive salt flat. I don't know if you can see that in the background there. It's incredibly dry. It's currently 6% humidity. It can go down to 2%. It's basically as dry as you can get. Water evaporates instantly. So it's a very harsh terrain. It gets very cold at night, down to about 5 degrees more or less, and then it heats up during the day. Now the air still is fairly cool, but the sun is incredibly strong. It's a UV factor of 11. It's basically as strong as you can get. Severe burn, basically, warnings that they give you when you come here. And the terrain is extremely harsh, very dry, very few living sort of plants, organisms. There are a few, but they're very scarce. Now, why is Paine here in the middle of absolutely nowhere? There's only one real reason, and that is there's a little gully which has a bit of water in. Now if you're in a desert, that basically makes it an oasis. So it's a place where people who are traveling through this region would come to and basically refresh themselves. Now historically, apparently, Paine has often been a place of exchange where travelers from one region would meet up with other people from other regions on their way to their various destinations and obviously exchange things. So it's got history. Apparently Paine was founded back in the 12th century, so that's pre-Hispanic invasion. So it's quite interesting. Now basically this terrain is volcanic. We're obviously in the Andes. We're at 2,500 meters, and we have basically a whole series of volcanoes that run along the Andes, and we are actually in volcanic terrain. It's very interesting to find this sort of thing. That's basically pumice, and it's very easy to pick up. There you go. It's just light, hollow pumice. And this stuff that we're sitting on is basically volcanic tuff. These are ash flows. They slope down towards the valley, and you can see behind the culprits of these ash flows are these massive volcanoes that are virtually always covered in snow, and there's a whole string of them heading off up to the north there. So some of these are older, some of them are actually semi-active. One of them is always on yellow alert for explosions. So some of these are sort of old igneous intrusions, some of them are old volcanoes, and quite an interesting terrain. So it gives for quite a variety of rocks. Some you find bits of olivine. Yeah, it's quite interesting from a geological point of view. And then you find these odd gullies. Now these are the gullies that some of them have water in. Some of them, I guess, have water at other times of the year. But you have to take into account that precipitation here is virtually zero. It's the driest place on the planet, and it virtually has no rainfall whatsoever. So the interesting thing about Paine is to be able to find these different ruins. They're just incredibly accessible and totally unprotected, which happens a lot in South America. A lot of these archaeological sites just have no control whatsoever. So here we are, right next to a very old, what was probably a sheep pen. So we've got basically an area in which the animals were probably kept overnight. And you have to take into account that this region, well, particularly Peine and other towns along this route, were basically transited by people who were dealing in llamas, sheep and other livestock. So they would need places to stop overnight and keep their livestock safe. So this is one of them. So it's quite interesting to see here. It's not exactly a piece of art, but it's obviously functional and made of volcanic tuff, basically. So you often find a lot of these extremely hard black rocks, probably andesite, something like that, and yeah, quite interesting from a geological point of view. A whole bunch of different kinds of rocks, all blown out of the volcano, basically. Some of them are extremely light, pumice-like. Others are extremely hard, very heavy. So yeah, interesting to see. Now that is also interesting. That is ceramic remains there. It's a bit unstable, this terrain, but there we go. Pieces of ceramic pottery, and this is red on the inside and black on the outside. Interesting. Okay, in the bottom of one of these gullies, I've had to put my hoodie up because the sun is crazily strong. I prefer to look like an idiot than get completely burnt. But anyway, you see here now, this is the volcanic tuff that's a little bit higher up. It's very rugged. But as we get down here, it gets very, very smooth and is eroded away. So basically you can see that there are occasions when water comes down here quite fast, well enough to be able to sculpture the rock. And just get down here. And down here, look at that. That is cold granite, extremely hard, although it does have this these kind of striations from the from rocks, I guess, and water that get dragged down over the surface. So this is the bedrock, and over here we have the overlying ash flows, which are volcanic tuff. Basically very interesting to see all the way that some of these get eroded, and the different textures within the ash flows. So there we have a interesting contact between the granite intrusions and the overlying volcanic rock. So as I was mentioning earlier, the climate is extremely harsh here, and basically the few plants that can survive in this kind of climate are plants that can withstand long periods of dry spells and then quickly replenish when it rains. So you have this sort of plant, it's dry, has the odd flower and dead flowers on it, but it's flowered fairly recently by the looks of it. Maybe there was a bit of rain recently, but right now it's tinder dry. But then you have these kinds of plants. Cactus, scary little thing there, and then other kinds of bushes and shrubs that are very hardy. This is one here. Again, kind of succulent style plant, and these other little things here. And then you find the odd sign of life. Sheep's wool. So sheep obviously come through here. So in the same way as they did many years ago, shepherds bring their sheep basically to the places where there's water. So shepherds actually are one of the sort of best groups of people to locate water. They know where the water is, and they travel from oasis to oasis basically, and this is basically where they keep their animals alive. Okay, so I'm just going to head across the valley now and up onto the other side to visit the area known as Old Peine, and see what we can find. Quite interesting terrain here. Now this here is the reason why Paine even exists. It's spring water. So if it wasn't for this water, this place just wouldn't be here. So the interesting thing is that when you cross the valley a little bit further up, there's no water. So there must be a spring pretty close. It's pretty fresh. It looks like the spring must be fairly close. And here it is. Just I built this structure around it to protect it. There you go. This is where the spring water comes from. It's coming out of the rocks all by itself. Here's the other end of the spring. Water just coming out of nowhere. So this is the source of life in the village here, and if it wasn't for this, Paine would not exist, and there would certainly be no life in this area, because it is completely dry. So just need to go a little bit further up the valley to realise that this place is a complete desert. So there's quite a lot of water coming out of this spring, and it flows down this little gully that it's cut naturally, but there are also some signs of an old channel that has been cut, goes alongside here. So some time ago they were already starting to use the water. However, unfortunately it's disappeared. However, if we cross just over here, the water from this spring has been immediately dammed up in 2 locations to give us these 2 natural swimming pools. So that's quite interesting, very nice, and crystal clear waters, come straight out of a mountain spring. I can imagine that people come here quite a lot. Well, I've come exploring just outside the village here, and according to Google Maps what I was seeing was some old ruins. So I'm just going to have a see if I can check them out. Meanwhile, these are these really old fields, all lined with stone. They've got these watering channels, old watering channels, which they use to guide the water. And this looks interesting, although it's obviously been restored, but it looks, there's a water mill, an old water mill there. It's quite amazing. Obviously again being repaired, but look at these old channels channeling the water down the hillside. So I'm heading over there, up onto this ridge, see what I can find. So I'm just making it up to where this stream gully is, and apparently it's just across the stream gully. So let's see what we can find. Right, and that's pretty steep. Oh, there we go. There are some ruins just over there, and here. Yep, these are old ruins. The question is, how am I going to get there? Looks like I might be able to cross down here. Give it a go, see what I can find. That's interesting. Always like to see that. Stones standing up, man-made intervention there. There's 2 piles of rocks. Unnatural. There's another one over there, and 2 over here. A couple of them over there. There's another one here. Piles of rocks. Sometimes, you know, you don't find sort of gigantic temples and stuff when you're looking for sort of archaeological ruins, but you do find a kind of just interesting sort of, well, you know, signs of human activity in the past. This terrain is, you know, just unviable. You know, why on earth would you want to kind of, you know, walk around on this? Look at that massive piece of, looks like iron basically, dropped out of a volcano. But it's almost sort of impossible to walk on. But then you come across other parts that have been completely kind of flattened out. as if someone's made a real effort to make this terrain walkable on. So interesting. And then you come across a little pile of stones. I mean, what exactly that's for, I'm not sure. It's another little one. But often these piles of stones are markers. So it looks like here there is actually a kind of track which heads off that way, and over here there's a clearing. So just along there there's a line of stones which goes along there. So, and I also noticed that over on the other side of the valley, which is going to be difficult to see, there's another little pile of stones. If you see that little column someone's put together there. So yeah, people have been here doing things. Exactly what, it's a bit difficult to say. So just making a bit more progress over this area, and there's a little small pile of stones which make up a little room, basically. Well, I wouldn't exactly call it a room, but it's a very small shelter. It's not much more than 1.5 meters long. And there's a bit more over here as well. There's another one of our pile of stones. I mean, they could be just boundary markers. Can't really think of any other reason why they'd be putting these little piles of stones everywhere. Now, as head downhill towards the lake area, we are beginning to find more signs of civilization. It's quite a good view, actually. So here's the gully. Across there is new Peine. Got some old walls on that side, but down here there are a whole load of structures which I found some of the other day, but I want to have a look at, and I can see more I hadn't spotted. So, and there's also something else that's interesting. Obviously you can see beyond, there's the salt flat, but down here, I come running across there in that direction, coming in here, is a road, a dirt road, which is not used right now. You can see it's not being transited, but it heads off up north. So I think that's the main road that used to come into the village, where all of the travellers, sheep herders, llama herders, whatever, would come into the village and arrive at the oasis. So I'm going to go and have a look at that. That looks interesting. It's quite amazing to see the patterns that are produced by the ash flows. See that? And they're all across these rocks. Just all over the place. Tons of patterns produced by the ash flows as they roared down the hill. So the rocks on this side just here are as I'd expect to see them now. What I'm seeing here is that the rocks have been worn by, yeah, this must be human traffic. So this is a route down into the valley. You can see it's a pathway still being used and heads off up this way. So it's see the pathway heading that way. The rocks are smoother. Where it's easier to tread, see it's smoother there. It's not exactly a beautiful piece of road, but you can see that not only people have gone through here, but by the looks of it, still get sheep traffic heading through here. And this is the road I came across the other day with the stones on each side. So interesting. So right on the edge here of the gully, you can see here this little sheep pen, and you see the way it's built with the pretty large stones. It's quite a lot of effort put into that, and little tower there to support a roof. It's got a gate. It's obviously the way they used to use these areas. Oh, hang on. Look at that. It's a little cave. It's not very big, but someone's made an effort to use that for shelter of some kind. Interesting. Just a little cave there hidden away in the rocks. So you can see the way that even nowadays they're using the valley floor to cultivate, and there's an old irrigation system there, a lot of walls. There's quite a lot of work gone into making sure that that works well, and there's a footpath along there on the other side. I'll see if I can get down there later on. And oh, here we go. Got another little den here. Another little place used to probably to keep animals. Made an effort there to make a shelter. And there's the other sheep pen on the other side. It's much better built. Let's head on further down, see what else we can find. So when you're looking for kind of ancient ruins and stuff like that, or at least signs of old civilizations, you've got to notice just like a line of stones. You see that line of stones? And then you think, hang on, that connects to another line of stones. And if you notice, all the part in between has been cleared, and you've got a line of stones on this side. So this is actually an old roadway that's been cleared and was obviously used at some stage. Certainly not used anymore. So this is pretty old. Very interesting. These stones just sitting there. They've been there hundreds of years. No one's moved them, which is a good thing because it'd be very easy to move. But they've got the interesting alignments. So you can see actually the road divides. There's a road going that way, back towards the edge. There's a road going this way. I'm going to follow what's left of this road because it's heading this way, which looks a little bit more interesting. I want to see these rocks. See what this is. See, they've put these stones standing up on this side. Very interesting. We have a large circular structure with some smaller additions on the side here. Fairly rustic walls, but certainly quite well made up from the point of view they've withstood test of time. Not the most beautiful walls I've seen, but it's interesting to how they've got this circular structure. And some more interesting stuff over here. Let's have a look. So take a look at that. Interesting. It's not very tall. Doesn't actually get to half a metre, that little doorway. But there's another one here and more of them over there. Interesting. Could have been that they had a roof on and the roof has collapsed. Again, small little doorway. That must be about 60 centimeters high. Another one here, and you've got these small rooms. Very interesting. Another one over here. Small gateway. And the room inside. And another one over here. This one looks a bit more collapsed. Now these could just be sheep pens, makes sense, just places where they'd keep their sheep at night. I think it seems a logical idea, but this region is not really known for sheep. It's more known for llamas. So a llama wouldn't fit through that. Way too small. So left with a question: what on earth are these for? And there are more of them. Many more. So here we have another one. Again, small gateway. Little doorway, and this one is actually better built. It's more intact. It's actually got grouting on the inside there, which could actually be cement by the looks of it. as if someone's tried to restore it. It's kind of got a grey colour, which does look rather like cement, but on the other hand, I can see these walls are a bit better cemented all the way around. There's been more work done on this, as if they deliberately tried to stop wind, rain. Wouldn't be rain in this region, but certainly could be wind and cold from getting in. Could be a place where they keep animals warm. No idea, I'm just wild guessing right now, because what's for certain is that it would be very difficult but not impossible to get a person through that. You could get a small person through there, it could be done. So maybe these are places where they try to keep animals warm, because this region gets extremely cold at night and very cold in the winter. Now, having said that, I'm just looking here across the little gully that I crossed earlier, and you see you've got one which is being used nowadays. Basically, it's got the wall around the outside, but they've used twigs and wood and brushwood and whatever they can find almost to create a kind of shelter over the top of that. That's obviously not for people, and it also has there, just so you can see that, it's got a gate for animals. So right now that is being used for animals. Whether it was always used for animals, I don't know, but that's what it's being used for right now. So that might give us a clue as to how it used to be used. Still being used today in the same way. Okay, so I just commented that this looked like cement. However, take a look at this. This is what I thought was going to be cement, judging by the colour. However, it's very soft. So this is the original mixture that they've used to fill in the gaps between all of the stones. So it's not modern day cement, and it hasn't been maintained. This is the original form and the original materials. It's actually very interesting. It's kind of very lightweight and smacks of ash of some kind. It's very soft, very hollow. Got a very light feel to it, warm to touch, as if it had been made out of ash. Could be ash. Right over there is a volcano, but it might be more locally found. I'm suspecting they made that up as a kind of cement. Yeah, very interesting. So it's another one of these structures, pretty large this one. However, this one's got a rectangular shape to it, very clearly defined rectangular shape, slightly larger blocks, and judging by the layout, looks like the entrance is over there to this particular room, and so this would be the doorway to this side. Oh, look at this. My goodness me, I didn't expect to find this. This is an old milling stone, and here is a stone that they used to use to mill, and it even looks like they were cutting a second one. That's an old rounded stone which looks like it has been used at some stage, but this one is the stone they used to use here. That is amazing to find just sitting here. Wow, that is incredible. just sitting here. Now what's interesting about this is that they have used a different stone. This is a rose granite, and this is volcanic, I think, by the looks of it. It's got these crystals, and they've obviously chosen these because they're a lot harder than this stuff, which just is actually dissolving. These are evaporite deposits and ash deposits, so they're extremely soft. And now I'm just looking for any other interesting signs. Rocks that are out of place, different colours. Ooh, that's interesting. So what this find means basically is that people were living here. This is you know, it's not just a place where animals were kept. This is a place where they would grind probably wheat. So very interesting. Gives us a little bit of insight into what went on here. Keep on looking. We've got this rather interesting divide here with a space between these two walls filled with earth. Not quite sure what that's about. And then this is a complete house. I'm impressed with this. Now the funny thing is there's no obvious doorway, so I'm just going to have to climb in. But this is what I want to look at. Look at that. So actually what we can see is the following. This is, you notice it's got cement holding everything together. You got cement here, and then the cement suddenly stops, and then you've got the nice and clean line of stones here, and you've got cement over there, cement again here. So basically that has been filled in. That's a filled in doorway for whatever reason. So we're in a little house which had a doorway and a roof with a window. You see the pointed structure of the roof there, the side wall, and to get a height scale we're talking 2 meters basically. I'm 182, so we're talking just over 2 meters high at the highest part. And yeah, very nice indeed. It just keeps on getting better and better. Take a look at this. The other buildings that we've seen so far have always been pretty higgledy-piggledy. The bricks there, so the stones would just be placed at random angles. And this wall, as you can see pretty clearly, has very distinct layers to it, which would suggest that the person who built it had a different way of doing things. Now, what's interesting about this is that we're in an earthquake zone, and a lot of the buildings that have very irregular sort of joins or irregular structure to the stones in the walls actually stand up better than ones that were built with a more, how should we say, European style building, because you don't have these what are eventually weakness zones in the structure. So this suggests to me that this is not from the 12th century. This is afterwards. This has to be when first missionaries came up here and decided to build a church. I'm not quite sure about this row of stones along here. I'm almost kind of thinking that this is a kind of a place that they would sit, but I'm not 100% sure about that. What we can see here is that the walls did have adobe, mud on the inside, and this would be probably some place where the priest would do his official duties, and there's most likely that they had some statue in there. So that to me explains the structure a lot better than trying to fit this into a kind of Inca model. So yeah, definitely smacks of something that's certainly not Inca. Now, apart from the really obvious structures that we've been looking at, it's often interesting to find other signs of human habitation, and I'm just coming across a whole load of it here. So here we are, broken pieces of pottery. So lots of it around. Some of it's nicer than others. And here we go. There's plenty more. So that floor around here is littered with it. Again, this kind of two-tone. Not very big pieces, been smashed to pieces most of this. But still quite a bit of it around. So yeah, interesting to see that. I'll see if I can spot any pieces that are a bit bigger. It's got a little bit of curvature to it. Again, dark on the outside. And yep, quite a bit of it. So again, it's got the same sort of colouring. It's slightly different. It's red on the inside, outside, but the actual material is basically a dark colour on the inside there. Now I've come back to the gully edge and come across this wall here. It goes down pretty straight and stops over there. There's another structure over there which I'll go and have a quick look at. Now I've heard people comment that they thought that Peine was a kind of a defensive outpost. But if that was the case, I would argue that their defences are not actually all that good, because you know, I've just walked around the top of the village. I'm not 100% convinced by the idea that this is a defensive wall to stop people coming in. It just doesn't make all that much sense, because the wall stops there. So you know, you'd have to be pretty dumb to try and climb over the wall if you could just go round it, you know. So not sure. So right at the end of this wall here, you've got these two holes over here and another two over here. Now I'm pretty certain that they would use these as pestle and mortars. They would use these to grind flour and grind other sort of food products. It'd have a sort of a large wooden stick with a rounded point basically, and just pound whatever they were preparing in these holes. Lots of different sizes, and yeah, it makes sense. So once again, more signs of human activity in the area, people preparing food and what have you. So that's actually just close to this little house which we were looking at earlier. So as we head down this wall, there's a gap here which just leads down these steps. Quite simple, and you could go down into the valley floor there, so quite a simple access down to the valley. So yeah, I still find it hard to think it's defensive. It could be, but like I say, you know, it really wouldn't be hard to invade this village. There's nothing to stop you just climbing up somewhere else. I mean, you know, if this was a defensive wall, then so here's me climbing in, you know. That's how difficult it is to get in, you know. So I think it's more a question of kind of limiting where your town is, maybe stopping kids, sheep, goodness knows what, escaping that easily. I don't know, just find it hard to believe that someone thinks that that's going to stop an invading army. So this house is a little bit different from the point of view of the stones they've used. So the stones over here are blockier and larger, and once again I'm seeing kind of linear structures. Interlocking corner there, back around the other side. I wonder if this has got something to do with the church just over there. Maybe some Spaniards lived here. Could be. So another little room here, definitely square shape to it, little pieces of ceramics, lots of structures here. Oh, that looks interesting. See that? It's a road, perfectly straight. It's basically a street with structures on each side. Looks like we've hit the main road, the high street. Look at that. There's a little guy looking at me saying, "What are you doing here?" So we're just heading down this high street. Amazing. You can actually see the stones are a bit worn. And here's the entranceway to other properties. Look at that. So I'm heading down the main street, this little village. I'm just walking by all of these buildings, these little some of them are small houses, some of them look to be pretty big. Look at this one. They put this kind of pillar on the doorway, and here you go, entering into the house. And yet attached to the house you have these little small structures to keep the animals in. Now what I'm seeing here is something that's interesting. This has got a curvature to the roof. It's possible, it'd be nice to see one intact, but it's possible that these were completely enclosed with stone. It's possible. It's certainly closing in at the top. It's possible, and there's some fairly large slab-like stones. It could be that this was that these were like kind of igloos of rock, completely closed in. It would make sense. So I'll look at a couple of these others. So I got another one over here. These have got fairly straight walls. Although there are a fairly large number of kind of slab-like stones there, which may have been used for the roof. But here we go. There's another large room. There's the doorway. Another doorway there. Oh, look at that. There you go. That's fairly conclusive proof of what I was suspecting further back, that the whole thing was covered completely with rocks. So it looks like they didn't use wood and mud for the smaller structures. They would just put stones across. Obviously the larger structures would be very difficult to do that. But for these smaller ones, I've certainly done that quite successfully. And there we go. Inside, pretty dark. Just see if I can get some light into this. So there we go, inside. The roof. It's a pretty small structure. I mean, you'd get like 2 or 3 sheep in there. Very nice. So this is a fairly large structure here. Large enough to be a kind of maybe a central meeting place, some kind. Got a little pile of stones here in the middle. I don't know, maybe some kind of fireplace. And it's got a smaller room on this corner, but the rest of this is one large patio area. Interesting. And back onto the main street and keep on heading down. So this is the last structure basically in this village that's visible, at least. And one of the things I'm interested in is that inside every one of these houses, there's generally a layer of dirt. Now, there are two possible options that come to mind. One is that they put a layer of dirt inside to make the floor smooth, level, etc., which is perfectly logical. And the other thing is that if they did have the roof structure, which was wood with dirt on top, when it collapsed, all of that dirt would also fall on the floor. So that would suggest that if we really wanted to see what the floor was like under here, we would have to remove a whole layer of dirt. Something that's kind of interesting. So this is the beginning of the track that heads into the village, coming from the north. So I'm going to head north. It's not very easy to see at this point. All you can distinguish up ahead is basically there's a clearing of rocks. Basically makes it a little bit easier to walk on. And it's a fairly simple crossing point across this little gully. So you can see there are stones have been worn a bit, and it's just a little bit easier to cross than other parts. So in this wilderness, basically, as you approach Peine, you would see these trees in the gullies, and these houses. So yeah, you'd be fairly certain that you're arriving at a place, little town, where you'd want to stay overnight with your sheep, your flocks or whatever. And yeah, just interesting to see what the village looks like from this side. Yeah, this pathway into the village is actually a little bit easier to spot from this side because of the change in the colour. Slightly less rocks, obviously this would be maintained, but you can see there's a change in the colour of the rocks, basically where the people go up the hillside into the village, and there of course are all the buildings we've just been looking at. So another thing I've just noticed is that as we come into the village, there's another line of stones heading around the outside of the village, and these are different from a building wall. They're just stones stacked on their side, stood up on their end, if you like, and delimiting basically the outside of the village by the looks of it. Again, I wouldn't say it's a fortified wall, but certainly a sign that you're entering into the village. So once again, still not 100% sure what the wall is there for, except for some symbolic delimitation of the actual the village itself. So one of the things that kind of bugs me is why would you change the location of the village from one side of the gully to the other side of the gully? Something must have happened to make them change, because you know, the other side of the gully is not exactly paradise either. There's really nothing too special about it. You know, it's not like it's greener, more sheltered. Really strange, to be honest. Not quite sure why. Maybe they have bushfires coming from this side, because there's really nothing between here and the volcano that I'm seeing up in the background. It's possible you're getting fires sweeping across, which would then stop at the valley because they couldn't cross the stream. It's just a crazy idea. Apart from that, there's nothing too obvious as to why people would change. So just noticing here, it's quite a clear evidence of people coming in and out of this building. What this building was, no idea. But one thing's for sure, that a lot of people would come in and out because the rock has been worn clean pretty well. Oh, here we go. Maybe it was the local restaurant because we've got a couple more of these holes for grinding. There's one here. I don't think that's part of the original tools, but here we go. Nice little grinding wells there for crushing up the food. Don't know, maybe they had something to do with this room here. Interesting. Let's see what else we can find over here. So we're not far from the church and this other fairly large building with these slightly more regular design to the structure of the walls, and more of these grinding holes. 3 of them here. So interesting to see them. Quite a few of them across the village. Another one over here. And some more of them here, look. Quite a few of them. Another one over here. And another one here. So they obviously did a lot of grinding for their meals. Interesting lines on that rock there. Don't look that natural. I'm not sure if they've got a meaning to them. But there we go. Quite an interesting place. So there we go. This is the old village of Peine, the old archaeological ruins. Quite an interesting place. Lots to be interpreted. This is the valley across which they moved, and you can see over on the other side there's a house actually being occupied, very similar to the ones we've been looking at. Stone walls, roof on the top made of brushwood and what have you. Yeah, it's interesting, worth a visit, and certainly needs a lot more understanding and interpretation. So that's the village of Paine, the old village of Paine. It's quite interesting. Got a lot of obviously pre-Hispanic buildings here. Probably 12th century sounds good, and then you do have some Hispanic influence in the structures. So obviously the Spaniards had turned up and had some influence here. Lots of broken pottery remains. Just here, just completely unattended, just lying here. And interesting. It's fascinating. Trying to think why they would cross the valley. That's kind of my big question leaving here. Why on earth would they cross the valley? It's literally 100 meters away. What was the motive? There are lots of volcanic rocks lying around, but same rocks on the other side of the valley. So you know, maybe there was a volcanic eruption or what have you, but that would affect, I'm quite sure, the other side of the valley just as much. And we're only talking about, you know, 200, 300 meters away. So it just really doesn't make much sense. So yeah, kind of a mystery there, worth a visit, and certainly needs a lot more exploration and interpretation. Right, I'm in what's known as the new village of Peine. It's where the old village transferred to. Something happened for them to move the village from one side of the galley to the other. Now, what's interesting about this is that we can see here that they've actually conserved a lot of the ways that I think they used to do the roofs of their buildings, because that would explain why we can't find the roofs on the other side. So let's take a look at this. So this is actually the church, but it's got an extension to it, and if you notice, it's got mud up on the surface, which is lying on top of wooden roof. So it's made of wood and reeds, basically. Not all that different from bamboo, but it's kind of a reed. They put straw on it, and then on top of that they put mud. So you can see there, the church itself is built that way, and the little annex that's next to it, which might be the priest house or something like that. So that's quite interesting to see, because that is repeated throughout the village. In the older houses where they haven't put tin roof, you can see the same kind of roofing. Let me just get back a bit here. You can see here, see the dirt on top of the roof. So it's built the same way.